Good day, everyone. Today on CMS 111 Introduction to Human Communication, we're going to be talking about verbal communication. Our learning outcomes. Define verbal communication and highlight its components. Itemize the core verbal communication skills. Describe the functions of verbal communication. Itemize the strategies needed to improve verbal communication skills. Now, the first question arises: what is verbal communication? Verbal communication is oral or vocal communication. It is communication by word of mouth or by spoken words. It's the use of sounds and language to convey a meaning or a message. Verbal communication serves as the primary vehicle for expressing ideas, emotions, and information between individuals. Verbal communication can be offline, online, physical, or virtual. It can be through acts such as face-to-face or mobile phone conversations, or through Skype, Telegram, Facebook, WhatsApp conversations, video chatting, or conferencing. It could even be speech, discussion, interviews through radio or television, or even through the internet. Verbal communication can take various forms. It can be through a phone call, speaking up in a meeting, giving a speech to a group of people, an in-person class teaching, ordering food at a restaurant, or even as simple as asking for directions on the street. Now, what are the components of verbal communication? Number one is language. According to Book in 2012, language helps us to convey information, to describe experiences, persuade and entertain others, and build or end relationships. Language serves as a tool for defining who we are, our identities, and preserving culture across generations. The way language is used can either build, unite, or divide people. The use of false words, generalizations can divide people, while that same language, when used rightly, can bring groups of people together. Sage publications in 2023 describe language as a system of symbols. These symbols are arbitrary, ambiguous, and abstract, and they can be expressed both verbally and non-verbally. Arbitrary means that they have no direct relationship to the objects or ideas that they represent. When we say something is ambiguous, it means it can have several possible meanings. And then abstract means they are non-material or physical. They are not concrete that you can touch. They can only represent objects and ideas. The second component of verbal communication is words. Words can carry multiple meanings, and those meanings can be either denotative or connotative. When we say denotative, we mean the literal dictionary definitions or meaning, while the connotative meanings, which are also called implied meanings, are the emotional or cultural associations. So it means that denotative meanings are generally shared and concrete, while connotative can be based on personal experiences, societal experiences, or cultural perspectives, and these meanings are often abstract. For example, black. Black denotatively means a color. I'm putting on a black jacket. But connotatively, black can mean dark, evil, something not so pleasant, a sad experience. So these layered meaning, they make communication very complex because interpretation now depends heavily on context. So understanding both the denotative and connotative meaning of words is essential for accurate communication. The third component of verbal communication we will talk about is sound. Sound. Spoken communication relies fundamentally on sound, particularly vocal sound. And we know vocal sound initiates and defines verbal interaction. So it encompasses various voice expressions like speaking, laughing, shouting, whispering, okay? The tone of voice also influences the meaning and effectiveness of verbal communication. Is the person angry? Does the tone suggest cheerfulness, humble, sad, and all of that? So the tone of voice influences meaning of sound. Other components of verbal communication are rates. The speed of speech that can affect the listener's perception and should be varied for clarity purpose. Another one is volume. The loudness of speech, enhances interpretation. Effective use enhances emphasis, but extreme loudness should be avoided as much as possible. And then pitch is also another component of verbal communication. Pitch means the highness or lowness of voice. Articulation, pronunciation, accurate speaking of words, including emphasis and sound clarity. Fluency is another component of verbal communication. Fluency has to do with the smooth flow of speech without excessive pauses, fillers, or distraction. So mastering these elements would enhance speech delivery, reflects personality, improves interpersonal connections, and leaves lasting impressions. Now let's go to verbal communication skills. We have 4 main verbal communication skills. They are speaking, listening, reading, and writing. Speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So let's start with the speaking skill. Speaking skill is a very creative skill, quite different from the listening skill. Speaking skill can take 3 forms. It can take the form of a monologue. A monologue is an intrapersonal speech where someone talks to himself or themselves or just thinks aloud. You can call it as you talking to you. The second form of speaking skill is the dialogue. Dialogue means 2 people, interpersonal communication between 2 people exchanging ideas or information. And then the third type of speaking skill, or the third form, is the public speech. In public speech, someone addresses a group of people. It could be physically, it could be virtual, or through media like radio or TV. Now let's go to types of speaking. We have 4 types of speaking. We have the ceremonial speaking. That's the type that is made during important events, entertaining or sharing of experiences, for example, during wedding ceremonies, graduation ceremonies, funerals. Those are ceremonial speaking. And then we also have informative speaking. In this type of speaking, ideas are shared clearly and accurately with an audience. The idea is to inform, to pass across accurate messages. The third type of speaking is demonstrative. Demonstrative shows how to do something by explaining or describing a subject in order to transfer knowledge and skills. And then the last type of speaking is the persuasive. In persuasive speaking, the aim is to convince. You're trying to convince an audience to accept a certain thought, a certain view, or to change an attitude, or you want to help maintain social relationships. This is mostly used during political campaigns or diplomatic talks. All right, so now let's go to the next type of verbal communication skill, which is the listening skill. What's listening? Listening has to do with the conscious and intentional process of receiving, understanding, interpreting, and converting sounds into meaning. It differs from hearing. Hearing is passive. Listening is automatic. It is intentional compared to just hearing. There are several types of listening, and each of them is suited to different situations and purposes. But the main types are empathetic listening. Empathetic listening means you're trying to be in the person's shoes. You're trying to feel what the speaker feels. You offer support without being judgmental. Okay? It is important for interpersonal relationships and requires you to be open-minded and civil. The next type of listening skill is the appreciative listening. This is a form of listening that is done for enjoyment, for pleasure. For example, when you're listening to good music, some movies, speeches, or comedy, those are appreciative listening. And then we have the critical listening. In this type of listening, the aim is to judge. The aim is to evaluate. The aim is to analyze messages, and then you decide whether to accept, reject, or seek for more clarification. And then we also have the comprehensive listening. In comprehensive listening, you listen to understand. Like I am lecturing you now, you are listening to get what I'm trying to say. When you listen to news, that's a form of comprehensive listening or instruction. It requires active participation and concentration on the part of the listener. We also have discriminative listening. This is focused on you trying to distinguish between different sounds, or voices. And then finally, we have the pseudo-listening. This is the kind of listening that you just pretend to be listening. You're looking at me as if you're listening, but you're not. You pretend to listen while not actually paying attention. All right, now let's look at functions of verbal communication. Functions of verbal communication. What are the functions? The functions are to share meaning. You share messages, you share information. It helps to shape thoughts. It helps to name objects, to perform actions, and also to craft conversations. We know that without verbal communication, interpersonal relationship would be quite difficult and strenuous. You are able to express your thoughts clearly, verbally. Okay? Now, what are the strategies for improving verbal communications? One of them is improve your speaking skill. Improve speaking skill. And then another one, know yourself. You know your strengths and your weaknesses. Stay calm. Maintain eye contact. Have good body posture and rehearse if necessary. If you also want to improve your verbal communication, you have to prepare your speech. You plan, you prepare. And then know your audience. Know their backgrounds, their interests, their attitude, their attention span. Master your audience. And then try to keep it short and simple. No ambiguous use of languages. Clear, simple, concise. Control your tone. Sound pleasant and respectful. Avoid disrespectful speeches. Avoid negative tones. And then maintain fluency and flow. Speak clearly such that your audience can hear you very well and know what you mean. And then finally, manage distractions to be able to improve your verbal communication. Lastly, what are the barriers to effective listening? One of them is the environmental factors. Poor lighting, uncomfortable room temperature, furniture arrangement, and all of those environmental factors. Another one is physiological noise. That could be due to ill health, deafness, illness, stress, hunger. Someone that is hungry cannot listen effectively. Then we also have personal bias. That has to do with the attitudes of the listener towards the speaker. Lack of preparation is also another barrier to effective listening, and then bad listening habits. What are the strategies to improve effective listening? Practice active listening, maintain eye contact, reduce distractions, avoid interrupting, keep an open mind, visualize what is being said, show empathy, give feedback, and then pay attention to non-verbal cues. Right? So these are the approaches used for effective listening. So today we've been able to look at verbal communication, that is the most basic and common form of communication used daily. We've also seen that spoken language is symbolic. We use words, sounds, and symbols to show meaning. And then we said proper use of language should be positive and influences people and proximity. It should cause unity rather than disunity. We also looked at key verbal communication skills, which includes speaking and listening. So this is where we're going to wrap up for today. I'll see you again in the next class. Bye-bye.